Welcome to Lit Happens, Unpacking Senior English. I'm Adriel.
And I'm Belle.
We're experienced English teachers dedicated to supporting both new and experienced educators in a world in which we are often time poor, to empower our students to excel in their English studies.
If you're an English teacher, like us, navigating this curriculum, then this podcast is designed with you in mind. And our mission really is to break down the complexities by unpacking English nationally.
Hello everyone, welcome to episode 38 of Lit Happens. Today's ep is on teacher organisation. As always, we've got Belle, myself and Adriel. Hello Adriel, how are you today?
Good morning, Belle. Good morning. We've got the energy drinks ranking at the moment. I don't know. I'm just going to put the name right there. We're not sponsored, are we, Belle? But
We're not sponsored.
I got them cranking at the moment just to sort of keep the eyes open and keep the memory and the mind going. There's a lot of good nootropics in this. Again, we aren't sponsored, but if I'm just going to put it out there again, if Ghost Energy Drink does want to sponsor our channel and do like a teacher edition, we're more than happy to collaborate with you guys. I would be more than happy. I don't know about other teachers, but
yeah. Look, talking about organization and teaching strategies. I mean, the energy drink, the caffeine, definitely a top strategy.
Yes, 100%.
That's it. As you did say, everyone's got a bit of a busy week coming into the end of term, finishing off some marking, seeing their HSC students off into the school holidays. So lots of busy times. We just thought we'd focus this episode this week on kind of all teachers, so not anything that's very English specific, because we have been doing some English syllabus episodes. So we thought we might just have a good chat, as we both love to do. You guys are very, very aware of our love of just talking. So we thought we'd focus that on teacher organisation today. So right before we get into that ep, we have an apt lit or quit for the week. So we've got lit or quit, planning your lessons on the weekend to set yourself up for the teaching week ahead. Adriel, is that lit or does that make you want to quit?
No, that's lit. That's 100% lit for me. And when I say plans, I think gone are the days where we used to write those strict lesson plans, like if we've got like our student teachers listening or people that are doing their pracs. I'm not saying that we have to do those explicit written lesson plans. Who knows? Your schools might require you to do that. I would say unlucky, but sorry, I'm a bit hyper today just because of the lack of sleep. But look, I think planning and having an idea as to what you are going to be teaching for the week ahead is very, very important on two counts. The first count being that it gets you ready for the week, so you can prepare yourself with potential questions that the students may ask you in regards to the content that week, but it also helps you to align yourself with your scope and sequence and your program, coming into sort of the ideas as to, okay, last week we may have, had some disruptions as we always do in the school term. What can we maybe chop and change? What can we differentiate? So I think planning is very important over the weekend in regards to what you're teaching and how best you can get the students to not only understand the course content, but get the best out of themselves in order to do the best they can in whatever stage they're in, stage 4, 5, or 6. So I think planning your lessons on a weekend is definitely lit. Do I spend 10 hours of my weekend doing this? No. I would probably spend maybe half an hour maybe on a Sunday afternoon or evening, just prepping myself, familiarizing myself with my notes and the content that is going to be taught. And there you go, off you go. I think, So again, everything has its sort of balance to it. There has to be a balance in the world. But I think it is very important. It's one of those things that we can't neglect.
Yeah, that's perfect. I agree completely. And what I really like, Adriel, is how you address that idea of planning, because planning looks different to everybody. Planning, I think, is also different depending on whether you're still in your first couple of years of teaching or you've been doing, your topics for a while. Because I distinctly remember in those early days planning for the next day, like every night, because you've got, so much to get your head around. It doesn't mean just
yeah,
English, just I think any KLA is like that, where you're trying to get your head around not just your content, how you're going to teach it, resources. And that might be maybe more of a humanities thing, but I remember spending my night looking at resources, picking, choosing. Did I photocopy enough? Am I going to
yeah,
project it? What am I doing? Like all those little
yeah,
little bits that
yeah,
go along. But definitely, I think once you've taught your topics a couple times around, the planning becomes much more quicker, much more of I think it's more preparing my brain for what I'm going to
yeah,
be guiding the students that week. And, just some other suggestions as well is if you know that you've got a busy weekend ahead, because we're all human beings with lives. I know our
mm,
students don't think that or they don't realize that, but, sometimes we have busier weeks, and sometimes I would find just a couple of periods off on my Friday to do that initial, planning prep, so that when I
yeah,
come in Monday morning, I know what I'm getting kind of straight into. So lots of ways around that, lots of good ideas.
yeah,
Should we get
yeah,
into the episode for more specific examples and anecdotes, maybe?
yeah. Let's
All right,
get
let's.
into it.
So obviously we're going to unpack with you guys today what teacher organization might look like. This will obviously be really relevant for our new scheme teachers, but
Mm,
also maybe a nice reminder for our more established teachers, or just some new tips or strategies. So what we are going to do as well is we're going to kind of connect it a little bit to the teacher guidelines, the teaching I've just blanked on the standards. That's it.
Standards. Yep.
Is that a PTSD response, do you think? I
Yeah,
blanked.
I think so. I
Anyway,
think
I
so.
think so. Anyway, we're going to make some links to those teacher standards as well, which might be really useful for any of you new scheme teachers that are organising your accreditation and things like that. So
Mm,
just to begin then with question one, Adriel, how do teaching standards, we're looking at the New South Wales ones here, shape the way we approach English? Or
yeah.
maybe
Okay.
even just
So
shape the way that we approach our teaching regardless.
our teaching. Yeah, yeah, no, I think teaching in general is probably a good way to sort of look at this. I think the teacher standards give us a framework and give us accountability as teachers. I think that's important. Accountability is a scary word a lot of the times for many people, but I have come to learn this, even after years of teaching. Sometimes it's going to sound controversial for us English teachers because we are generally the most intellectual teachers in the school setting, as we may consider ourselves to be. This is just the brain. Apologies to whoever else is teaching at other KLAs. It's just the way we function. But but look, I told you I'm a bit crazy this morning, so it's
I
going to
love
be
it.
an
I love
interesting
it. It's
episode.
hilarious.
Yeah, yeah.
We're
So look,
wired.
I
Mhm.
think yeah, I think the teacher standards definitely give us a framework as to an accountability that we do need to adhere to, and I think it's a good thing. Accountability is something that makes sure that we are always reflective on our practice. In particular, it gives us an understanding of developing our professional knowledge, and also helps us to navigate, I guess, the ways in which we are going to function within the classroom. So we've got a fine balance when it does come to teaching in regards to a bit of that creative sort of flair and individuality that we have, but also there needs to be a compliance across the state as to, is everyone teaching the content that is, I guess, somewhat similar across the board. I mean, we have up to 80,000 kids that sit the course for year 12, for example, every year. And if we didn't have compliance in regards to the teaching standards, I think we would be in a little bit of a trouble. But I think just going back to what I was saying previously, accountability can seem like a scary word, especially for young teachers, even for older teachers. Like, I know myself, sometimes I think I know better. I think I know, why we're doing this, X, Y, and Z, or here we go. Like, you might have your head teachers coming in and observing your lessons, or senior executives coming and observing your lessons. And that can often be a scary thing, but I'm going to challenge our teachers today to look at that from a different perspective, a different lens. I know you and I have been more and more more comfortable as we have gone on in our teaching career,
Yeah.
because we don't get flustered by people coming in and holding us accountable. I think accountability is always this frame of mind for us where it's either a fight or flight sort of thing for a lot of people, but for us, it's an opportunity to grow. And I think
Yeah.
if we can shift our perspective in regards to aligning ourselves with these standards and the accountability that it sort of maintains for us, I think it does definitely allow us an opportunity to grow. Now, I'm not saying here that there are things that we might disagree with in regards to some of these standards and whatnot. I'm
Mhm.
not saying that you're not going to have those disagreements, but I think across the board, it's important to have this litmus test, something that we can continually align ourselves with as teachers. And I think it does shape the way that we organize ourselves. And again, we're talking about teacher organization in today's episode. I think it
Yeah.
gives us this framework to allow us to sort of continue to align ourselves with something. And I like that. I think it's important. So again, I'm not shooting Team Teacher in the foot here compared to Team Nessa, but I think it's important for us to be accountable. And I think the teacher standards do shape us into being the professionals that our students require and need across the state. So
Mhm.
definitely,
Mhm.
there's a few ways, and I think that word reflection falls into it as well. But yeah, what are some of your thoughts there, Bill?
No, I completely agree, and I think I really enjoy there your reframing of we could either look at this as like a scary kind of red tapey
Mm,
aspect of our profession, but I
mm,
really agree with you in that looking at that reframe, it's actually a way that teachers are offered structure and guidance.
yeah,
And then, like you said, once you've done this for a little while, you start to then get the
yeah,
confidence because you know that your craft develops to almost automatically represent these professional standards because you spent those
yeah,
first few years or you really were in the thick of looking at how are you actually applying your KLA within the bounds of these professional
yeah,
standards. So I really think it's really worthwhile because I think when you are trying to hit these standards and you're trying to be really thoughtful about your day to day and how it comes back to these seven standards in general, it
mm,
really does make you much more of a well-rounded teacher,
yeah,
So like I think about, those early days and being somebody who always, because I'm an English teacher and I've always loved literature and I studied literature at university, that the content itself for me wasn't the part that I was learning or dealing with so much as was the way that I apply it to students
mm,
within their context, within kind of a safe and supportive classroom. I think about some of the schools that I did my prac at and some of the schools I started my teaching at, and they were very much schools with students of diverse needs that if I wasn't able to narrow down how to create that safe, clear, structured environment, then no learning was going to take place. Like the content then didn't matter if I
yeah,
couldn't work out how to offer that structure. And that takes time. We all have our own
yeah,
anecdotes of, the ways that we built that skill in itself. But I love the fact that if you think about these standards as ways to make you a well-rounded teacher. It's not just about your students and your content and how they
mm,
learn, but looking at these supportive environments, feedback, because feedback is another thing that
yeah,
also held me accountable, not just held the students accountable, but also
mm,
held me accountable in terms of, well, are they actually, is this actually working? Are they actually getting it? Or do I need to
yeah,
reframe? And that is so important because I think if we get stuck in the, well, I'm just doing it and you've got to adapt, teaching is,
mm,
I think, what's so tiring about it. It's very much a give and take kind of relationship there, I think. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah, I definitely agree with you. Look at it with that lens of it's helping to shape you into a very well-rounded teacher
yeah,
and using that accountability as a positive to give you confidence as opposed
mm,
to letting it, stress you or wear you down. Yeah, I love that.
yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Maybe we should get into question two then. So, how do planning, assessment, and professional learning relate to our growth as teachers and kind of
Mm,
connect to the way that we are organized as a teacher?
I think this is super important. I'm always a person that it's funny. I like plans, um, assessments, and then also professional learning have been a bit of a challenge over the years. Planning is so, so important as I've matured as a teacher as well, though, because of the helter-skelter nature of teaching. You may go into a teaching day thinking, yeah, I'm just going to have my 2 periods or 3 periods and I'll be able to do X, Y, and Z on my period off. And then by and behold, you'll spend the whole period, doing something that has just shot up in the school day. Or even over the weekend, you might have the perfect plan and you probably, have something happen with your home life or whatever it may be. So I think having an initial base plan, it's sort of like for the English teachers out there, we speak about having like a skeleton essay when it comes into writing essays for our senior students. We can, for us as teachers, have a base plan um,
Mhm.
for your week, for your day, whatever it may be, and be adaptable, be malleable. And I think what it does is it gives you a framework to build off of. You're not building off on just the zero. You've actually got a starting point for a lot of these different things, and you can adapt your plan according to whichever challenges you face in the day. I think planning in general, that's just for your day-to-day teaching and week-to-week teaching, but planning also for your year ahead, planning for lots of different uh, variables in this teaching year. I think it's so, so important that we do engage with this as teachers because it just gives you something to work off of. I think that's important. Don't go in thinking you can just sort of wing it because you'll collapse in probably about 3 to 4 months, maybe even earlier, because it is a very mentally draining job. So, or career or profession, I should say. So it is something that we do need to sort of understand. In regards to assessment, we've always already spoken about this in terms of a growth. We can backward maps. This allows us not only as teachers to sort of understand, all right, what are we working towards for our students?
Mhm.
And we've discussed this in length in our other episodes. So I think assessments I probably skip over a little bit, but professional learning is something, once again, that I do want to emphasize. I think I'm coming up to my maintenance cycle, which is ridiculous because I feel like I've only just done it. But I think it's happening in the next year or two, which I'll just have to double check. But professional learning, like something like this podcast for us, is awesome. It's considered professional learning. It's something that we can align with our goal. We can make it fun. A lot of the times we know we have to just tick the boxes. We might sit after a Monday afternoon, on a Monday afternoon after a whole day of work, and we might have to sit in a staff meeting. We have to go through professional learning, and I'm guilty of this. I will sit there thinking, "Why am I sitting here? I'd rather go home and do X, Y, and Z." But again, changing that mindset will definitely benefit you. I'm again going through this journey. Um, Shout out to the old area of studies journeys there. But we're we're going through this journey where we're actually understanding professional learning is just so important for your growth as a teacher, as an individual, as a human being, because we know that every day brings about new opportunities to learn. And, you know, sometimes we just need to give people a chance. We need to give people an opportunity in order to harness whatever they are teaching us. And I think all of these three elements here, planning, assessment, professional learning, are definitely things that we can organize into our day to day, our week to week, our month to month, our year to year, that will definitely be very beneficial for our growth as teachers and human beings, I think, in general. So, yeah, that's sort of like how I would say connect these ideas to our growth. And like I said,
Mhm.
it's a journey that we're on, so it's changing. Who knows? I might come back next week and say, "Hey, I'm annoyed at what I was saying last week, but I understand the importance of it."
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's good for teachers to remember as well that you don't do this alone as well. You work in a team. So when it does come to like term planning and assessment, you've got a
Mm,
faculty that will support you in that as well. And think about your faculty meetings where, that's the time where as a group you kind of discuss with your colleagues, how are we planning things? What is our assessment going to be? What are the core skills? Now, these are often
mm,
things that are pre-prepared, but I think it's good to remember there will always be that touch base. As teachers, we always think, do we need to improve
yeah,
something? Do we need to shift something? So
yeah,
yeah, I think if you're a new scheme teacher and you're a bit worried that you're going to have to do all these, there are things already in place and out there. I think it's more about
Yeah.
how you, as the new teacher, engage with that and try and learn and take that on board. Obviously,
Yeah.
your faculty heads will be very aware, that you're coming in
Mm.
either to a new school or as a new teacher. So,
Mm.
everybody will always be really mindful of that. But also you'd have your whole school approaches as well. So I know most
Yeah.
schools will also have a lesson organization or a framework or an
Yeah.
outline, and they will also often run early career teacher meetings, which are
Mm.
not just for new teachers, but also teachers who have come from a different school. Because as someone that has, changed schools a few times,
Mm.
it is really hard in those initial phases to wrap your head around, oh, this is the way we do it here now. This is the
Yeah.
new way. Because obviously every school is very different depending on their context. So don't
Yep.
forget, I think that when we're looking at planning and professional learning, that your school will have strategies and people to support you. So do reach out. Maybe it can be very busy in a school day for all these teachers, but maybe be a bit proactive, reach out, get on the front foot. There will always be teachers who naturally have that, I guess,
Mm.
bone in their body where they want to mentor and help and guide. You're always going to
Mm.
find those people, and they will be the
Yeah.
ones that will be so happy to help you through. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think that's so important for us, like, to consider. It's a community that we have. It's a
Yes.
village.
I
It's
love
not
that. Yes, I
just
love
you as
that.
an individual. Yeah.
That's right. All right. Well, question 3 then. What are some strategies that can actually work in the classroom in terms of maybe some practical organizational strategies that will
Yeah.
translate really well?
I like how we say actually. Actually,
Mhm.
shout out to shout out to some of the golf videos I've been watching on YouTube. I love this.
That's
But
funny.
anyway, let's not get distracted. Actually, we do have some of these different elements here that do work. And I'm going to say this. I think I mentioned this to you back in the day when we were struggling with some um, behavior classes, for example. And I think the first thing that I told you was kids crave structure. Um,
Yes.
so some of the things that I would often do would be we didn't have like all the fancy high tech gadgets and stuff like this, but we were all like the chalk and talk sort of thing when we started. And just a bit of a context sort of background here. I used to teach quite a few of the troubled, struggling kids, especially the young males. That was my speciality. Boys' education from 8 to 10 in English, and like these would be your high flyers, your interesting sort of students. And I know one of the key things that I always used to do was always establish structure. If I went into
Mhm.
that classroom thinking we can do activities which were just sort of on the go, all right, now we're gonna do X, Y, and Z, and how about we go around, move it? Like it would never work in those sorts of settings for me. It may work in other
Yeah.
settings, who knows? But I think kids crave structure. Even if you do those types of activities, it needs to be well set up and well structured.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
know the basic tip that I said back then was, if my kids had come in, again, looking at the context as well, if they had something like PE or something they were running around prior to coming into my lesson, and we all amped up, I would come in and literally do a lesson where I might just write on the board and say,
Mhm.
"Hey guys,
Mhm.
pop this into your books," and then we'd discuss after. Like I'd split my board into 3 sections, write this all down quietly, and then after each section that I write down, not only did it show the kids that they had no excuses for them, sorry, to not to write because I'm writing as a teacher, but it also just settled them down. Now that was a very simple strategy that used to
Yes.
work for me. I know times have
Yeah.
changed a
Love
little
it.
bit
Mhm.
now, but I think we do need to consider some of those basics. Also, if you are struggling as a new teacher, organization
Yeah.
in terms of maybe getting your notes together. I know yourself
Mhm.
personally, I used to see you with literally a page or two of notes going into
In
every
front of
single
me.
classroom.
Mhm.
And yep, that's right. And you would
My
guide
god, you
yourself and
remember
lead
that?
yourself. Oh,
That's
100%.
amazing.
100%.
Yeah.
These are like
Yeah.
different strategies that we used as we were going, as we were growing up and, looking at our teaching sort of journeys overall. So I think they actually do work in the classroom. There's actuals, but
No,
look,
it's a
in
great
terms,
tip. Mm.
yeah, yeah. In terms of like other more modern sort of ways, you just need to make sure you know what is going on in your classroom. So know your content and know it well.
Mhm.
That is one of those
Mhm.
standards that we do consider, because I
Yeah.
would often ask myself this. We've had a few students over our years of teaching where they're quite bright. And my question to myself would be in the night before, be okay, what are the 10 questions that this student might ask?
Yes.
And,
Yep.
I'd prep myself. All right, how would I respond to these? What are the different approaches? What are the different ways in which you would respond, and maybe show or demonstrate an understanding of the content that the student, prospective student, is asking of you. So these are the
Mhm.
different strategies that I would ask. So number
Yeah.
one, have a very, very simple structure. All right, don't go too crazy when you start off. Number two, have your notes with you. And number three is making sure you are asking yourselves those questions. What are the questions that my students will ask, and having a response to those? I think by having
Mhm.
these three sorts of things organized, it'll make your teaching a
Mhm.
lot easier in the
I love
classroom.
that. Those are some wonderful, practical, easy to put in place strategies that I
Mm,
also love and I also utilize. I'm a big
mm,
fan of, if I need to settle a class down, we are just copying and writing and
yeah.
processing. And I was always also, especially for my juniors, a big fan of when they enter, they do a do now activity.
Mm,
And
mm,
that do now could have just been something revision from the last lesson that's going to
yeah.
connect to what they're doing today. Or sometimes I would put something fun, like I would put like a big word and just get them 5 minutes to create new ones out of it. Like
Yeah.
something to, I think what that does is it gives the students who have entered really well and easily something to start working on so that they
Yeah.
don't then get antsy when you're trying to get the stragglers in. Um,
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
as somebody who's quite type A and needs organization to not feel anxiety. Personally, that's me. Put my hand up for that. I find as well the environment itself will make a difference as well.
Mm,
So I
mm,
think one strategy is if you had a bit of a rowdy class, the lesson before and the room is a bit untidy, it happens to all of us, still happens to me now sometimes. I might just, pop my head out and say to my guys, all right, guys, you need to line up, you need your books. And then I'd
yep.
quickly shut the door, quickly run around, tidy things up.
Yep.
Also, when they enter, even getting their attention, if I don't have a do now, I would verbally go through what we're going to do that lesson. And then maybe while I'm verbally doing it, just put a few dot points on the board. I know that a lot of schools love us to have the intentions for the lesson on the board.
Mm,
And you
mm,
can probably do that if you're coming in after a break. But if you've had back to back classes, you might just not have gotten time to do that. So I think it's
yeah.
okay to know that you can verbally do that and
Yeah.
just dot point as you go, because I think the visual is really helpful.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would put even like rough time limits around it, because
Mm,
you always have
mm,
students that are like, yeah, happy to do activity 1 and 3, but
yeah.
activity 2 is going to kill my so sometimes when you've
Yeah.
got, yeah, I think like those visuals are like so simple but can be so
Mm,
helpful, and not just for them, it helped keep me on track too, because
yeah.
how like when you're getting into it and you're trying to get the timing of everything, it's so
Yeah.
easy to,
Yep.
how common is it even when you have a practice student and go, that took way longer than I thought it was
Yeah.
going to,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there's like so many strategies here where if you
Mm,
just think about the timing. And I would also suggest one more thing when you mentioned you can absolutely do those more complex activities. I often
mm,
found, particularly at the start of a new year, I don't do them until well into the term when I've worked out my guys and what they're
yeah.
comfortable with, and we've got like a clear structure,
Yeah.
or even lesson format. Or another thing you can do to produce a bit of structure is having some clear phrases that you use. So
Yeah.
the same phrase or two
Yep.
that you use to get the attention, the same phrase or
Mm,
two when you're trying to get into discussion. And over time, that becomes like a little stimuli for the kids to go, oh yeah, we're ready to move on now. So
yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
lots of different strategies there, I think.
I like what you just mentioned there. Remember, as a teacher, you establish the expectations and
Mm,
routines and settings
mhm,
in your setting. and you are the one that is responsible to create that culture. As difficult as it may seem, do not let a individual high flyer or the kids dictate the culture that you create.
Yeah.
It may be like butting heads at the beginning of the school year, but I know like for the first term or so, and we've taught in multiple settings as well. So we
Mhm.
sort of understand it is not easy all the time, but if you
It
stick
takes a
to
lot
it,
of work. Mhm.
yeah, if you stick to it, it will
Mhm.
make life easier for terms 2, 3, 4, and the kids will respect you
Oh,
for it
so
as well.
true.
You know,
So true.
yeah, they respect that structure. So you are
So
responsible for the
true.
culture in your classroom. There we go, culture in your classroom. Put that
So
as a
true. I
phrase
love that
there,
culture in the classroom. That's
and maybe
fabulous. Well, there used
we'll
to
trademark that.
uh-huh. Well, there used to be that old adage that we used to hear a lot in the university days where,
Mm.
really old school experienced teachers would say, don't smile until Easter,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
you don't, and yeah, you could take that literally, I suppose, but
Mm.
I think it's more about, you have to establish that firm, authoritative
Yeah.
nature first. And because, like you said, after that, then eventually you
Mm.
will be able to have a joke and crack a smile, and the students will still know where
Yeah.
the line is. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's also probably a matter of like
Mm.
personal value and,
Yeah.
personality. But I do think that that goes a long way personally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into question 4. Our second last question for the app is a great little episode. I think we've got cooking here. So, what are the best hacks, tips, and general organizational time savers for teachers?
Yeah. I think you touched on this previously, and we've already spoken about like having a rough idea as to what you're doing in your
Mhm.
lesson. So I'm not saying a full-on structured lesson plan, but having notes, knowing what you're
Yeah.
teaching in that specific lesson, base them off of your program or your scope and sequence, whatever
Yeah.
it may be, having those
Yeah.
notes for each lesson. And like I said, have those guiding questions. What are the things that are going to facilitate your thought, your discourse, whatever it may be? But I like that you mentioned timers or visual prompts. I am a
Mhm.
big proponent of Google Timer. It's the easiest thing to put on. Just type it on
Mhm.
Google, type in timer,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
activities. Whenever you get students to do work, pop the timer on.
I
So they
love
know
that.
that they have to work within a certain time frame. And like for me, where I'm at in my current setting, we have 75-minute periods, which are quite long. But in
Mhm.
saying that, what the timer does is a visual cue and prompt for the kids to, know the times when they need to be working either silently or
Mhm.
working in a group or whatever it may be. But they've got something to guide them and align them in regards
Mhm.
to the organization, but it
Mhm.
also gives you time. The
Mhm.
second thing is you mentioned sometimes, if we've got like an arts or crafts sort of lesson or, where people are sticking things, cutting things out, or there's lots of rubbish to be had. I've been
Mhm.
doing this recently where I'm walking around the classroom. I'll take the bin with me and I'll be like
Mhm.
cleaning things up as I go, as the kids go. So then
Yep.
at the end of
Pop
the
it
lesson,
in.
it saves you time. And that's
Yeah,
a
it's
good
good.
little tip there.
Mhm.
The third little tip there that I would say also is walk around the classroom, be active.
Yes. Yes.
Make sure, I know certain schools will allow students to, um, change classroom structures and whatever, but if you've got a certain seating plan or a seating
Yes.
arrangement,
Or
I should
table
say,
organization. Yeah.
tables, whatever,
Mhm.
do not let the kids change it
Mhm.
because you've got that for your personal sort of point of view. I know, like for us,
Yeah.
we were fortunate. We were fortunate in our last school when we taught together. We had our own classrooms. I was a big proponent of the horseshoe because it just allowed me
Mhm.
to be the center of attention with the cravings that a teacher
I
here.
do
But
remember walking past your room and just that proximity that you were able to get with the horseshoe definitely had them full
yeah,
attention.
uh,
Totally.
but
Mm.
I completely understand. Like in my new school where I'm
Mhm.
teaching at currently, we have basically like 3 rows of twos. So the way that our tables are set up,
Yeah.
and again, that works out. And I don't have my
I'm
own
a big fan
classroom.
of that
Yeah,
personally.
yeah, and each person has their own sort of ability, and I can see the merits in that as well. But one thing I will
Mhm.
say as a teacher is, sometimes I'll walk into a classroom. Say, for example, I have a class after lunch or
Mhm.
after recess, and I know that maybe the teacher beforehand might not have been strict with table arrangements. I'll make sure I go into that classroom nice and early and I set that
Mhm.
classroom up. It's annoying. It's
Yeah.
a pain in the backside,
Yeah.
but it will make
But
your
it
lesson a lot
saves you
easier.
time. Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So little things like that. Even if, let's say, for example, you have to jump. Like I said, I go from classroom to classroom now. So I completely
Mhm.
understand. I don't have my own classroom. Um, but even if I've gone in for a period, we have like a 5 minute sort of waiting time period, whatever, between classes.
Mhm.
I'll
Mhm.
get a kid or two as the rest of them are waiting out there to come in and help me set the classroom up before we all enter. Again, just an
Yeah.
organizational thing because that 2 minutes will
Yeah.
save me 15 minutes of yelling and screaming and whatever later on down the track. So
Very
little
true.
organizational tips there definitely
Yeah.
help. Um, don't recreate the wheel when it comes to
Mhm.
teaching. Ask your teachers and your colleagues, if you're teaching something new, hey, how have you approached this?
Mhm.
What are some resources that you might have? Now, again,
Yes.
double-edged sword here. Don't be lazy and just say, hey, can I have all your resources? Like, ask them the question and say, hey, like, what are your thoughts on this? Or how have you taught this before? If they give you a resource, ask them, how did they use it?
What would you do with it?
Adapt,
Yeah. Mm.
yeah, adapt it to your lesson. Like, I know that it can be tempting to just sort of give them a worksheet or give them like a computer sort of lesson or whatever it may be, but it will make your life difficult because again, your culture that you establish, if you were to do that with your kids, shows that you are not invested
Mhm.
in your learning with the content, which
Mhm.
again then gets
Mhm.
the kids to question, well, if my teacher's not invested or organized, because they see it, they're not, as much as they might act dumb and be stupid a lot of the time, they're not. They're actually quite bright and they
They're
see it.
very aware of what,
And
yeah, that's right.
yeah, that's right. They know, and they'll ask you those questions. So if you're not
Mhm.
organized, why should I be organized? And you can
Mhm.
hold that over their heads where you say, "Well, I work 5 times harder than you. This means that you guys
Mhm.
should be working hard." You know. So
Mhm.
there's a
Mhm.
few little tips that I have for our teachers.
No, that's good. That's really good. I like what you mentioned about the resources too, because I think with subject areas like in English, where you don't have maybe a textbook to fall back on and something like that, you do really
Mm,
need to be organized. So if it's printed resource, have it printed. If it's a resource, now we've got Google Classroom, and if you have
yeah,
access to, devices, it saves you a lot on printing to just upload that document and get students to access it through there. I think as well, thinking about how your resources kind of go together. So that
yeah,
makes them more meaningful. So even
mm,
over a span of a week, I'm not saying you have to have a worksheet every lesson. I'm personally a big proponent of on the board in our book discussion work.
mm,
That's my preference, but I will obviously use worksheets where I need to. But even
yeah,
thinking about even I think if on that Friday or on the weekend you work out what 3 4 kind of sheets you need and you have them printed for the
mm,
week, and then you can use them
mm,
as you need to during the week, and you're not doing that mad rush and scramble in the morning where you and the other teachers who also need to print stuff are fighting for the
yeah,
what 3 printers in your school, where
yeah,
you can do whole class sets. Like, it just saves you so much time. And I remember
mm,
something
mm,
that you did that we still do, and I still recommend to people, like even book checks to help keep the kids
yeah,
accountable. And we'd make a book check slip that was
mm,
easy tick with a bit of a comment
mm,
to save us some time. But I love that what you would do is you would say to your students, all right, well, take about 5 pages or 10 pages and
yeah,
glue it in. And when you filled in your book and you get to that, that's when I check it. And man, I love
mm,
that because it's a game changer. It saves you the 2 weeks before you have to do their reports, doing the book
yeah,
checks. You've got stuff to write in their report comments. Like, it
yeah,
just saves so much time. And one more tip. What I've been using. I used it a lot last year in particular. Was I forget. It's very easy to find on Google, but basically, it's a site, and you put all the students' class names, and then it does a random
the
spinning wheel, and
wheel.
it lands on a kid. The wheel, yeah. And so
Yep,
like you can use that for I would use it for a particular year 9 class where they never wanted to discuss or answer the question.
yep,
So without me having to pick, I'd be like, fate has chosen. They couldn't argue about it, and they just answered.
yeah,
Where I would spend minutes getting students to give me an answer. They would just be like, okay, fine. But I love that for that. I love it for even a random check in the lesson if you just want to see
Mm,
how kids are working. And, obviously we're walking around the room. I like to walk around the room and have a quick read of what the kids are writing.
yeah.
That lets me know. But yeah, there's so many ways to use the wheel, and there's so many versions of that website. I know a lot of teachers who also do like class dojo and rewards and things like
Mm,
that. I think all of that is all dependent on your style and what you want to do. But just I think knowing that there's so many of these resources and digital
mm,
resources as well, now that our
mm,
schools are getting more electronically equipped, there's a lot that you can use, to
yeah.
help. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
even using Google Classroom for marking, like with making rubrics in there, like particularly for
Mm,
formative tasks. It's the best. You've
mm,
got a formative task that you're using, you're going to talk about in their report, get all the kids to pop it in there. You can do the click feedback, but you've also got substantial info in there. So much you can
yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
All right. Let's get into our last question for the lesson then, Adriel. This is really good. Focus on kind of teacher mental health and stuff. How
Mm,
do we stay well and then sustain ourselves as teachers? Because as anybody's listening to this episode, there's a lot that has to be done, and there's a lot of thought that
yeah.
goes into the lesson, not just what you're teaching, how you're delivering it, how you're engaging with the students. So yeah,
Yeah.
how do we work on our well-being so we can sustain this for long-term
Mm,
success?
mm. I'll say this. Listen to our episode on mental health. We did this about 2 weeks ago. Just a little bit of a plug there, but we covered this quite a bit in depth. And there's so much more to talk about this. But I'm going to start off with this. If you're a leader of a faculty, make sure you're organized. Um, and then I know this sounds like a bit of a shout out, but you're creating and establishing a culture for your team. And I only say this because my current setting, I won't name names, but like shout out to my current head teacher or head of department.
Mhm. Mhm.
Organization is fantastic, fantastic. And it
Amazing.
just makes life so much easier for the rest of the staff in facilitating that team. And both you and I will agree, our previous head teacher, who we consider our work mum, would be the same thing. Like she'd be the first person in earlier morning, do tasks that um, sometimes like she'd know the characters. Myself, for example, I won't tell Adriel to do that today because he's a bit cranky or he's a bit off the dial or whatever it may be. Um,
Yeah.
these these are some sort of tips that I would say for head teachers. Now, obviously, you need to take care of yourself as well. And
Mm.
how do we sustain this? I think the big thing falls down to this, Bill, like organization, being organized, holding yourself accountable to your plans,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
also prioritizing your tasks. Um,
Yeah.
so setting boundaries. You may not be able to get to everything. So look at like what is the order of priority. Like everything is not going to have the same significance when it comes to deadlines or whatever it may be. Sometimes you do need to make sacrifices.
Yes.
I will. We're talking about this prior to recording today, where I said, over the weekend I moved about 3 tons of topsoil just to do a bit of house stuff over the weekend, and then had some marking to do, which was what 70 to 80 or so prelim papers, and I was just like, after working 12, 13 hours on the Saturday, I
Yeah.
was a bit buggered, having to, you know, come inside then and then the evening work. But then that meant then my Sunday, I had to legit spend 8 to 10 hours just marking those papers. So
Mhm.
again, there are sacrifices that you do need to make at certain times. It's just as long as you set boundaries that that does not become a constant thing. Do you know what I mean? I know, for
Yeah.
example, I've finished that task now. I've done that for today. I've got my task set out for the day. So in saying that, set out for the day each morning. Set yourself maybe a list, write it down in a diary on your computers, whatever it may be. What are the different tasks, and order them in terms of priority, color code them, whatever it may be. What is it that you can do today that needs to be done in terms of priorities?
Mm.
Uh, Put that as like a red. Yellow is like, oh, it's approaching, and then green is like, okay, cool. Sometime in the next week or two, whatever, I need to sort of get these things done. And it's a really nice way of just holding yourself accountable. Um, I think that definitely works. In terms of advice to
teachers in general, I think remembering you mentioned this earlier on, you're not alone. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask
Yeah.
questions. Ask questions. I know this very clearly, in speaking to people in our teaching community, that you may not always get along with everyone, right? It could be your head teacher, it could be your executives, it could be whatever. But you're the one that needs to sort of facilitate that change. As difficult and as hard as it may be the bigger man or the bigger woman, in this circumstance. Collegiality is so, so important.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I know it's difficult. So, try and have a joke, get some lollies into the staff room, I don't know, just be the one that facilitates a good culture. Um,
Hmm.
if you're a young teacher, be passionate. I think that's probably the big thing. Have a passion for what you're doing. If kids see that passion exuding from every bit of your pores, your fellow colleagues see that, they're gonna love working with you. Your kids will love working with you as well. So
Yeah.
that's my little tip there. And then again,
No, I
other
like
mental
that.
health sort of things that we've spoken about have been covered in our episode about 2 episodes
Hmm.
ago, so 2 weeks ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, have a listen there.
Yeah, I think just to end, I think it's also really important for us as teachers to recognize that sometimes it's good enough. Um, I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of us teachers have kind of, perfectionist
Mm,
elements and aspects, but sometimes really what you've done right now is enough. And there is
yeah.
sometimes I think a point where we maybe go overboard, and
Yeah.
it's fine if you've got something you're excited about and you're putting a lot more effort in it. It's just when you think about it, you don't want to overexert yourself. And,
Yeah.
time is so precious in the teaching planning world that if you spent a lot of time on this, think about what it potentially might have taken away. So I think there is a tendency to make things perfect and make things the prettiest. And I'll never forget, one of the first schools I taught at in what feels like eons ago now, my head teacher there at the time, she made a really good comment to me where she said, you know, a good lesson is not about having the prettiest worksheet, like,
Mm,
and it wasn't, we weren't even talking about worksheets. It was just the perfect example, where she said, that they're going to learn in a variety of different ways, a variety
yeah.
of different things. And it's not, don't pigeonhole yourself in, I have to kill myself to make the perfect worksheet, or I have to
Yeah.
kill myself to make the perfect slides, or I'm going to spend 10 hours on this slides presentation that's,
Mm,
I'm very guilty of this. 60 whatever slides long, and in reality, in the whole term, I only showed them about 15 of it, because you
yeah.
get
Yeah.
you get so excited, and I'm not saying that
Mm,
that's bad. I think that's beautiful and that's wonderful. I think just keep in your mind, how much of this am I going to use? Have I
mm,
spent enough time now? Is it maybe time for me to go do something else? Because we want this to be sustainable, and we don't want to be resentful of the time that maybe we're putting in, because there are things in
yeah.
our day that might shake us a bit. But I think we have to sort of say to ourselves that if you're that type of person, then I know that you're good enough is actually phenomenal. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
let it go a little bit, pace yourselves a bit better.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of my
Yeah.
last
Sing that Frozen song and so let her go away. Whatever it is. I'm
totally,
not gonna do that, but yeah,
totally.
you know to hear me sing.
Yeah. No, it's true because, another thing, if I can say, teachers who are also parents will note the difference between
Mm,
how you worked and how you prepared before you had your own children at home to go to, and, how you prepare
mm,
now, because it's chalk and cheese, because obviously,
mm,
timing is everything, and both ways are good. Neither is wrong, but just that this
yeah,
idea of, I know I had to learn the hard way too of, oh, I can evolve. I don't have to
yeah,
do it this way for it still to be really good. And so over
mm,
time, you will find strategies. I know speaking with other teachers gave me some strategies of how to work maybe smarter, not harder. I'm not saying we
mm,
don't work hard. I just think that there's a lot to be said for balance. And I know you talked about that a
yeah,
lot. And I love that. It's about, is there balance in how I'm preparing and how I'm organizing?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, wonderful.
Mm. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. That comes to the end of our episode. We've hopefully covered a bit of the connection to standards here, lots of strategies, as always, lots of anecdotes from Adriel and myself. um, but yeah, until next time, please just remember to share us on your socials, show us your support. We really appreciate it. And continue to engage with us and let us know what particular episodes you want us to churn out for you guys. Yes, we're still doing our English focus ones, but Adriel and I also think it's really important to do our cross KLA episodes. So let us know. We'd love to get your engagement on things.